Hi everyone, and welcome back to Malice in the Mitten, where we tell the stories that shaped Michigan and the lives that should never be forgotten. I'm Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Mulligan.
Every case we cover begins with a person, not a headline. Someone who laughed, loved, had dreams for the future, and mattered deeply to the people who knew them. Today is no different. On October 19th, 2023, a young mother answered a call from her two little boys. They were frightened, and they wanted their mom. So she got into her car to get to them, believing that calling for help would keep everyone safe. Instead, what unfolded over the next several minutes would forever change the lives of her children, her family, and an entire community. This is the story of Jordan Wheeler.
We want to remind everyone that our goal is never to sensationalize tragedy. We believe every victim deserves to be remembered with dignity. Every fact deserves to be handled carefully, and every story deserves to be told responsibly.
So, let's begin. But first, a content warning.
This story contains discussions of domestic violence, coercive control, alcohol abuse, homicide, and the death of a parent. It also includes references to children experiencing traumatic events. While we approach every case with care and respect, some listeners may find today's content emotionally difficult.
If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help is available. In the United States, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline by calling 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233, or by visiting thehotline.org. If you are in immediate danger, call 911. There are moments in life when every decision feels ordinary. Answering your phone, starting your car, driving across town, checking on your children. None of those choices feel remarkable in the moment, but sometimes, without anyone realizing it, those ordinary moments become the final chapter of someone's life. On the evening of October 19th, 2023, 29-year-old Jordan Wheeler climbed into her vehicle after receiving a call that every parent dreads. Her two little boys were frightened. They wanted their mom. So Jordan did exactly what mothers do. She went to them. She could not have known that she would never make it back home.
You know, that's immediately heartbreaking. Not because we know how this story ends, but because Jordan wasn't going there to argue with anyone. She wasn't going there looking for a fight. She was going there because she was responding to her children asking for help. That, as a mother, is just a lot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I'll let you get into the story before I go too far.
And before this episode is over, we're going to walk through every documented step that led to that night. The marriage, the separation, the investigation, the trial, the evidence presented to a jury, and ultimately, the search for justice for a young mother whose life ended in front of the very children she was trying to protect. Before Jordan became another headline, she was simply Jordan. She was 29 years old. A mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, someone whose world revolved around two young boys and a daughter who depended on her. Like so many parents navigating separation, life wasn't simple anymore. Her marriage to Stephen Bryce Wheeler was coming to an end. The divorce process had already begun. The family was living through one of the most emotionally difficult transitions any household can experience. For many couples, that chapter is painful. For Jordan, prosecutors would later argue, it became deadly.
Do we know how long they were married?
We do, and we'll talk about that as we build the timeline. Because one thing we're going to avoid doing in this episode is rushing. The story didn't begin with gunfire. It began months, perhaps even years, before that October evening. Understanding those earlier chapters is essential if we're going to understand what happened next. By the fall of 2023, Jordan and Stephen Bryce Wheeler were no longer living the life they had once imagined. Court records and testimony would later reveal a marriage that prosecutors described as deeply troubled. The relationship had deteriorated. A divorce was underway. Custody arrangements had been part of everyday life. The children were now moving between parents, while the adults attempted to navigate the end of their marriage. For children, that uncertainty can be frightening. And on October 19th, it was. As evening settled over Clinton Township, Jordan's phone rang. It wasn't an unknown number. It wasn't work. And it wasn't a friend. It was her boys. They were scared, and they wanted their mother. And Jordan made a decision that countless parents make every single day. She got into her car and started driving toward the home she had once shared with her family. She had no idea that someone else inside that house had been drinking, or that before the night was over, she would make one final call. Like so many stories we tell on Malice and the Mitten, there wasn't one single moment that changed everything. There rarely is. Instead, relationships often change slowly. Small cracks become larger ones. Arguments become more frequent. Trust begins to disappear. And eventually, two people who once imagined growing old together find themselves standing on opposite sides of a courtroom. That was where Jordan and Stephen found themselves in the fall of 2023.
You know, divorce is never easy. Even when both people agree it's the right decision, there's always grief involved somewhere. There's always uncertainty and confusion and the highs and lows of emotions, especially when children are involved.
Absolutely. And it's important for us to say something here. Thousands of couples divorce every year. Most never become criminal cases. Most parents find a way to put their children first. So, what happened here was not an inevitable outcome of divorce. According to prosecutors, something far more dangerous had been unfolding inside that relationship. By October of 2023, Jordan had filed for divorce. The couple shared 2 young sons and a daughter, and like many families navigating separation, parenting responsibilities continued despite the breakdown of the marriage. Court testimony and later reporting described a relationship marked by increasing conflict during the months leading up to Jordan's death. Prosecutors would later argue that Bryce, which is what he went by, struggled with heavy alcohol use, and that his behavior had become increasingly volatile as the marriage deteriorated. Now, those allegations became an important part of the state's case and were explored during the criminal proceedings. As always, we distinguish between allegations presented in court and facts established through evidence and the jury's verdict.
Okay, so was Stephen Bryce, actively working at the time? Did he have a job, or was he just a loser alcoholic?
No, he actually had a job. Bryce had served in the National Guard and also worked as a private investigator. On paper, those careers suggest someone trained to remain calm under pressure, someone accustomed to discipline, observation, and responsibility. But jurors would hear evidence suggesting that behind closed doors, alcohol had become a growing problem. and that the stability those professions represented did not reflect what prosecutors alleged was happening inside the marriage. If there's one thing that becomes clear as you read through the available records, it's this. Jordan's focus remained on her children. Like countless parents navigating separation, she was trying to build a new normal. That meant sharing parenting, exchanging the children, and trying to preserve as much stability as possible while an emotionally difficult chapter unfolded. It wasn't perfect. It rarely is. But there is nothing in the public record to suggest Jordan expected October 19th to become the last day of her life. She was still planning for tomorrow.
And why would she? I mean, that's not something that anybody thinks of, especially in tragedies like this. And I guess that's easy to lose sight of. We already know how the story ends, but Jordan didn't. I mean, no one expects their last day to be their last day, especially if it's a traumatic ending. But for her, she was simply living another Thursday.
Exactly. None of us wake up believing we're living our final day. Jordan certainly didn't. She answered the phone calls. She cared for her boys. She worked through the challenges that come with ending a marriage. She was trying to move forward. Then, the evening of October 19th arrived. As daylight faded over Clinton Township, Jordan's telephone rang. On the other end were two frightened little boys, her sons. They needed their mother, and Jordan didn't hesitate. She got into her vehicle and headed toward the home where the boys were staying with their father. Her daughter was with her at her sister's home. One of the boys said his father had thrown a tablet at his back. It was her son's phone call that brought her to the house where she used to live with Bryce. The confrontation inside prompted her to call 911. Jordan arrived in her pajamas to collect them, but once she entered the house, the situation escalated. Jordan told the dispatcher that Bryce had placed his hands on her. She also said she had captured what happened on video. The following exchange reflects the 911 call. Now, we have removed portions that do not affect the sequence of events, but we have not changed the meaning of Jordan's words. This is Jordan's 911 recording. My child called me crying that his dad threw his tablet at him. So I was coming to get him, and then he put his hands on me.
No. Okay.
I have it on video.
Okay. Can you get out of the home with him?
I'm trying to get my kids' stuff so I can get out of here.
Get out of my house.
They're ready for bed, so they're trying to get dressed and get their stuff first.
Do you need medical attention, ma'am?
No.
Get out of my house. Okay. Can you wait in the vehicle that you arrived in?
Until you arrive? I'm getting my kids out of here.
Get out of my house.
I also believe that he's been drinking, so... Audio note. Jordan can be heard breathing heavily. Listen carefully to what Jordan was doing in those moments. She was answering the dispatcher's questions. She was trying to gather her sons. She was attempting to leave. And she was warning police that she believed Bryce had been drinking.
Okay, what did he do to you?
He grabbed me and tried to push me out of the house.
What's your name?
I have it on video, Jordan Wheeler.
Stop talking to him, please. You said Jordan?
Yes,
You said he's been drinking?
I believe so.
Does anybody have weapons?
Yes. He has a gun.
There it is. She told them there was a gun inside the home.
She did. At that moment, Jordan did not report that the weapon had been displayed or used to threaten her, but she knew it was there, and she made sure the dispatcher knew it too.
Where is the gun?
Somewhere in the house, probably in the bedroom.
But it's not being used or threatened in any way?
No,
Okay, what's his last name?
Wheeler.
First name?
Stephen.
Date of birth for him?
Audio note. Movement and indistinct sounds can be heard. Jordan is speaking to the children. Get your shoes. The boys can be heard in the background. Jordan was still trying to get them dressed, still trying to gather what they needed, still trying to leave the house. The dispatcher then asked another question.
And how many children are in the home?
Audio note. There is not a response from Jordan. A little rustling is heard. That's all. And then 4 gunshots are heard.
Hello?
Fuck you!
Hello? Hello? Jordan, what's going on? Hello?
I shot her in the fucking head!
Hello?
I shot her in the fucking head!
Sir, what is going on?
I cannot be!
And then another woman's voice could be heard. She was the neighbor across the street.
What's going on?
I shot her in the fucking head!
Who?
Jordan!
Why? What the fuck?
He said her name. There wasn't confusion about who had been shot. There wasn't confusion about what he was claiming he had done. There was no confusion in him at that moment.
None at all. And the call had captured far more than the sound of gunfire. It documented Jordan reporting that Bryce had grabbed her. It documented her belief that he had been drinking. It documented the presence of a firearm. It captured her efforts to collect her children and leave. And moments later, it captured Bryce repeatedly stating that he had shot her.
Where is she at now?
60 car. Be advised. We have a domestic, Baker area. Caller said he tried to put his hands on her. Male half is Stephen Wheeler. He's flagged for being anti-police and making statements for suicide by cop. 60 car. Be advised. Male half is on the phone now saying that he shot the female in the head.
The dispatcher no longer hears the female in the background. Jordan had done what people are told to do. She recognized danger. She called for help. She answered the dispatcher's questions. She disclosed the gun. She tried to remove her children, but before officers could reach her, 4 shots were fired. Jordan Wheeler was 29 years old. She had gone to that house because her children called for their mother. She never left alive.
And the call never disconnected before it recorded the truth of what happened inside that home.
That recording would become one of the most consequential pieces of evidence in the case. But when police arrived, they were not entering a scene that was fully under control. They had been warned that Stephen Wheeler was considered anti-police. They had also received information suggesting that he had previously made statements about suicide by cop. Jordan lay mortally wounded. Her children were still there. A firearm had been discharged, and the man heard admitting to the shooting remained at the scene. For the officers approaching that house, the danger was not over. The silence inside the home didn't last long. Within minutes, Clinton Township police officers began arriving at the residence. Only moments earlier, a dispatcher was on the phone with Jordan reporting a domestic situation with her husband and children. Now, they were responding to a homicide scene. They also knew something else. The man believed to have fired those shots was still there. Every approach to the home had to be made with caution.
Those officers had almost no information beyond what they heard over the radio. They didn't know if anyone else had been hurt, they didn't know if the children were still inside, and they didn't know whether the shooter intended to surrender. In fact, they actually were insinuating that the shooter did not intend to surrender.
Exactly. Every domestic violence call carries uncertainty. This one carried something even heavier. The dispatcher had stopped hearing Jordan's voice. That alone told responding officers that something had gone terribly wrong. When officers secured the residence, they found Jordan Wheeler. She had suffered from multiple gunshot wounds to her head. Emergency medical personnel attempted life-saving measures, but Jordan could not be saved. She was pronounced dead from her injuries. The home that had once been a place where birthdays were celebrated, toys scattered across the floor, and children tucked into bed had become a crime scene. Every room, every doorway, every item inside the home would now be documented, photographed, measured, collected. Because once first responders completed their work, the investigation took over.
People often think that an investigation starts when detectives arrive, but in reality, it starts the second officers secure the scene.
It sure does. And from that moment forward, every decision matters. Investigators aren't trying to prove someone guilty. They're trying to determine exactly what happened. That means preserving physical evidence before memories fade, before anything is disturbed, and before assumptions replace facts. Investigators began documenting the residence exactly as they found it. They photographed the scene, collected physical evidence, recovered the firearm, and secured Jordan's cell phone. And that phone contained more than a 911 recording. According to Jordan herself, she had also recorded part of the confrontation on video. The evidence would become another important piece of the investigation. Combined with the 911 recording, it allowed investigators to compare what Jordan reported in real time with the physical evidence they found inside the home.
Well, so they weren't relying only on one source, being the scene. They had multiple pieces that could either support or contradict each other.
100%. Strong investigations don't depend upon a single piece of evidence. They build a timeline. Every witness, every recording, every photograph, every forensic finding, each one either fits or it doesn't. And detectives would spend the next several hours doing exactly that. Now, perhaps the most difficult responsibility that night had nothing to do with evidence and involved two little boys. Children who had called their mother because they were frightened. Children whose lives would never be the same. Now, out of respect for their privacy, we will not discuss details beyond what was established in court. What matters is this: those boys became victims that night too. Not because they were physically harmed, but because trauma leaves wounds that cannot always be seen. While crime scene investigators worked inside the home, another team began a different task. They needed to understand what happened from the only adult still alive who had witnessed it. Bryce Wheeler was transported for questioning. The evidence collection was complete. Now, the interview would begin. And detectives would ask him the question only he could answer. What happened inside that house? When detectives begin an interview following a homicide, they are not necessarily waiting for a perfect confession. They are listening for consistency. Every statement will eventually be measured against witness accounts, physical evidence, recordings, forensic findings, and, in this case, Jordan Wheeler's own words. Words preserved during her final call to 911. Hours after initially asking for an attorney, Bryce changed his mind. He waived his rights and asked to speak with investigators. The detectives entered the room calmly. They did not begin by accusing him. They did not raise their voices. They simply gave him the opportunity to explain what had happened inside the home.
And by that point, they already knew so much. They knew a lot. They had heard the 911 recording. They had examined the scene. They had spoken with witnesses. So they were not entering that room without context.
That's right. The interview was not taking place in a vacuum. Detectives already had a framework. Now, they needed to determine whether Bryce Wheeler's account fit within it. Bryce began by focusing on the divorce. He spoke about the marital home. He claimed Jordan had violated an agreement by arriving there without his permission. According to him, she had no right to enter the residence without his consent. But Jordan had already explained why she was there. her son had called her crying. He told her his father had thrown a tablet at him, and Jordan went to the home because her children were frightened. She went there to bring them to safety.
So almost immediately, there are two very different ways of describing Jordan's arrival. And I don't like the way he's trying to say that she was like trespassing. Like that made my stomach flip a little bit, like, ew.
Mm-hmm.
However, Bryce described it as a violation of his privacy. Jordan described it as a mother responding to her children. And I don't know, were they fully divorced by this time, or divorce was just underway? Because technically that's still her house as well.
That's right. So no, they were not divorced yet. So basically, kind of what happened here is he was with the National Guard, right? So he'd already had a huge issue with drinking. So while he was gone, she packed up and got out of there. She was the one who initiated the divorce at that point. So they were in the thick of it.
Yeah, divorce is underway, but that was still her home. So, ew. I just ew at her coming to his place and violating his privacy. It's like he's trying to shift the blame and immediately, because I'm from Florida, immediately I start thinking about those standard ground laws. So he's immediately trying to excuse it, as if he had a right to do it.
That's right. He is definitely victim blaming. And he also made it a point during the interview to say that she had left the home. And it was in writing that if she was ever to come to the house, she had to notify him first and get his permission. So there's more.
He's trying to use little things to fluff off a huge thing.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah. And that distinction is important because the investigation was never simply about whether Jordan entered the house. It was about what happened after she arrived. Bryce told detectives the argument escalated. He claimed Jordan insulted him, moved into his personal space, and placed her hands on him. He described himself as someone who was not violent. And at one point, he told investigators, "I've never been a violent person." Detectives did not argue with him. They allowed him to continue. They asked where the disagreement began. They asked how the confrontation moved through the house. They asked where the firearm had been kept. And they asked what caused the situation to escalate from an argument to gunfire.
What kind of strikes me is how patient they seem to have been. They didn't tell him what to say. They kept giving him opportunities to explain it in his own words over and over again.
Yeah, they did. And I watched the interrogation video and they were very calm and my blood's boiling. I'm like, but they did a really good job. They did a really good job. And that patience was not sympathy for what had happened. It was technique. An investigator who interrupts too quickly may lose the opportunity to hear a contradiction. An investigator who supplies an explanation may accidentally shape the answer. These detectives did neither. They listened, and then they returned him to the central question: what happened to Jordan? Eventually, Bryce admitted that he shot her. He described walking away from the kitchen area during the argument. He acknowledged retrieving the handgun, and when detectives asked what he had done, he said, "I shot her." The admission answered one question, but it did not answer the most important one: why? Bryce claimed that he had acted in self-defense. He said Jordan had been inside his personal space, and he described feeling cornered. He portrayed the shooting as the result of a threat that he believed he could not otherwise escape. But detectives had already heard Jordan's call. They knew what she had said in the moments before the gunshots. She was speaking with a dispatcher. She was trying to get her children out of the house. And the recording did not capture the violent physical attack Bryce was now describing.
Yeah, that recording gave detectives something more reliable than either person's memory. It gave them the moment as it unfolded.
Right. And memories can change, accounts can shift. People can minimize their own actions and reinterpret what happened after the fact. But the 911 recording remained fixed. At one point, a detective confronted the conflict directly. He reminded Bryce that Jordan had been on the phone with 911. He explained that he had listened to the call. And he told Bryce that Jordan did not sound as though she were attacking him. She sounded as though she were trying to get the boys out of the house. Now, the detective did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply asked Bryce to explain how his claim of self-defense could be reconciled with what the recording captured. This is the detective as heard during the interview. She was on the phone with 911 when it happened. That sentence changed the interview. Until then, Bryce had been describing the confrontation almost entirely from his own perspective. But now his explanation had to coexist with evidence outside of his control. Jordan's voice, the dispatcher's observations, the timing of the gunshots, the physical evidence inside the home, and the statements made immediately afterward. Investigators also knew that Jordan and the boys had not all experienced the same part of the night. Before the shooting, the children had seen their father becoming increasingly agitated. And according to information presented during the case, Bryce was intoxicated and yelling. At one point, he fell into a wall so hard to leave a substantial hole in the drywall. And it kind of looked like, if he just kind of fell in hard with like his shoulder or something. It was a large hole. Jordan told the boys to run outside, and they obeyed her. Thankfully, they did not witness their father shoot their mother. Jordan had gotten them out before the final violence occurred. Even during the most dangerous moments of her life, she was still protecting her children.
And that might be the clearest picture we have of who Jordan was that night. She recognized the danger, and her first action was to get her boys away from it.
Yeah. Jordan's final decisions were not centered on herself. They were centered on her children. She arrived because one of them called her. She contacted the police. She directed the boys outside. She remained inside while help was on the way. Those actions would later become essential to understanding what occurred. After the shooting, police located spent shell casings inside the home. They recovered an empty firearm found on the mantel. A neighbor told police that Bryce had appeared in the doorway and announced that he had shot Jordan. His words to the neighbor were crude, angry, and immediate. They did not describe uncertainty. They did not describe an accidental discharge. And they did not resemble the restrained explanation he would later give detectives inside the interview room.
So investigators were comparing more than one version from Bryce himself. There was what he allegedly said immediately after the shooting, and what he said hours later when he had time to think about it.
Yeah, it's called control.
Yeah.
Now, statements made immediately after an event can be significant because there has been little time to construct an explanation. Later statements may contain more detail, but they may also reflect time spent processing consequences. Detectives had to examine both. They also had to compare those statements with Jordan's recorded words. And throughout the interview, the investigators continued returning to the same issue. Jordan was much smaller than Bryce. She was under 5 feet tall. And this dude's 6 feet tall. She had called police. She was attempting to remove the children. And she was shot multiple times. When Bryce attempted to frame Jordan's presence and behavior as a threat, the detectives did not accept the claim without examination. They pressed him to explain how a woman seeking help from 911 presented a danger requiring lethal force. They asked why he didn't walk away, why he did not leave through another door, why an argument required a firearm, and why Jordan had been shot repeatedly.
They were not asking him to admit that he was a monster. They were asking him to explain the choices he made.
And that is what made the interview so effective. The detectives did not rely on insults or intimidation. They relied on logic. They allowed Bryce to describe himself as calm, as nonviolent, as frightened. Then they calmly placed those descriptions beside the evidence, and the distance between the two accounts became impossible to ignore. Near the end of the interview, Bryce indicated that he wanted to sleep. He said he needed sleep. He said he needed time to pray. The detectives respected that decision. They thanked him for speaking with him, and the interview ended without shouting, without a dramatic confrontation, without the kind of theatrical confession often portrayed on television. But detectives did not need theatrics. They had something stronger. They had Bryce's admission that he shot Jordan. They had his claim of self-defense. And they had the evidence necessary to test that claim. Bryce Wheeler was given hours to explain what happened inside that house. Jordan Wheeler only had minutes. Yet it was Jordan's voice spoken to a 911 dispatcher trying to protect her children that investigators would return to again and again. Because explanations can change, memories can shift, stories can be reshaped. But the recording did not change, and when the case entered a courtroom, a jury would be asked to decide which account the evidence supported. Now, nearly every homicide investigation eventually arrives at the same place, a courtroom. It is where evidence is examined, witnesses are questioned, experts explain their findings, attorneys present competing narratives, and ultimately, 12 ordinary citizens are asked to answer one extraordinary question. What did the evidence prove beyond a reasonable doubt? For the jury in Macomb County, that question was not simply whether Jordan Wheeler had died. That was never in dispute. The question was why. Was this an act of lawful self-defense, or was it murder? Over the course of the trial, jurors heard testimony from responding officers, detectives, forensic experts, medical professionals, and witnesses connected to the events of that night. They listened to Jordan's 911 call. They examined photographs from inside the home. They heard Bryce Wheeler's own statements to investigators, and each piece became part of a much larger picture.
This wasn't one witness convincing the jury. It was all of the evidence beginning to support every other piece of evidence.
Right. No single piece stood alone. Jordan's words matched the timeline. The physical evidence matched the scene. Witness testimony supported what investigators found. Bryce's own statements were compared against each of those pieces. The jury was asked to weigh everything together, and throughout the trial, prosecutors argued that Jordan had come to the home because one of her sons called her frightened. They reminded jurors that she contacted 911, that she instructed her boys to get outside, that even during the final moments of her life, she was focused on protecting her children. The prosecution argued that the evidence did not support Bryce Wheeler's claim that deadly force had been necessary. Instead, they argued that Jordan Wheeler had been murdered. The defense presented a different interpretation. They argued that Bryce believed he was in danger. They challenged how jurors should interpret the confrontation inside the home and asked them to consider his claim of self-defense. As in every criminal trial, the burden remained on the prosecution. They alone were required to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury carefully considered both sides.
And that's exactly how our justice system is supposed to work, I suppose. Every defendant receives the opportunity to present a defense, and every piece of evidence should be examined and is examined, and then the jury decides. I mean, that's how it works.
That's right. And after hearing the testimony and reviewing the evidence and considering the law, the jury reached its decision. Stephen Bryce Wheeler was found guilty, but justice, however, is a complicated word. A verdict can hold someone accountable. It can protect the public. It can recognize the truth established by evidence, but it cannot return a mother to her children. It cannot erase the trauma carried by those who loved her. And it cannot undo the decision made inside that home. During sentencing, the court considered the profound impact Jordan's death had on her family, and especially on her 3 young children. Those consequences would continue long after the courtroom emptied. Because while criminal cases eventually come to an end, grief does not.
One of those things that stayed with me throughout this entire story is that Jordan's last decisions were all about her children. She answered a frightening phone call. She came when they needed her. She got them outside. She called for help. Even in those final moments, it was still just their mom.
She was. And that is how I hope Jordan Wheeler is remembered. Not simply as the victim in a homicide case, but as a mother, a daughter, a sister, someone who was loved. A woman who, even while facing unimaginable danger, acted to protect the people she loved most. That is her legacy. Jordan's story also reminds us of something experts in domestic violence have said for years. Leaving an abusive relationship can be one of the most dangerous periods a victim will ever face. Jordan took steps that many professionals recommend. She separated. She filed for divorce. She sought help. She called 911. None of those actions caused what happened. Responsibility belongs solely to the person who chose violence.
If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, know that help is available. You do not have to face it alone.
When I started this podcast, I said every case begins with a person, not a headline. Jordan Wheeler was never just another case file. She was a woman whose life mattered. A woman whose children loved her. A woman whose family continues to miss her every single day. At Malice and the Mitten, we believe forgotten stories deserve to be remembered. Not because of how they ended, but because of who they were. So today, we remember Jordan Wheeler. May her story remind us to listen, to protect, to support those living in fear, and to never forget the people whose voices deserve to be heard. If this episode moved you, or even if you believe in preserving Michigan's forgotten stories with care and compassion, please follow Malice and the Mitten. It helps more people discover these stories and helps ensure that victims like Jordan are never forgotten. I'm Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Mulligan.
And this is Malice in the Mitten,
where the story matters,
but the truth matters more. So thank you for listening, and we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Okay, hit all those buttons, smash those buttons, hit all the stars, like and subscribe, follow us everywhere you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye.